Hey folks, time to do Trump's Awful Presidency Part 6. And very foolishly I thought, hey, after the last one was so long, why not do one that's a little easier, it'll take less time. Let's look at Trump's attempts to repeal the Affordable Care Act, because that couldn't possibly take that long. I mean, he didn't do that much to try and take away people's health care, could he have? Yeah, he did. Okay, let's get into it. This post will be pretty wonky, and I'll have to summarize some stuff. May not get all the details perfectly right, but I'm going to do my best. Officially, the bill was called the Affordable Care Act, but I'm going to call it Obamacare because that was basically used as a slur by Donald Trump. And it also highlights how repealing the Affordable Care Act was really a vindictive thing for him because he really, really hates Obama. While campaigning, Obama made health care a top 4 priority for his administration, and in February 2009, after getting into office, said he would work with Congress to enact comprehensive health care reform. Getting it done was a Herculean effort, which involved a lot of politics, which I can't get into now, but on March 23, 2010, Obama signed the Affordable Care Act into law. So just as a reminder, what does the Affordable Care Act do? Let me just mention a few of the highlights. It banned insurance companies from rejecting people based on pre-existing conditions, so they couldn't block you from getting insurance just because you've been sick before. It banned lifetime caps on essential benefits, which meant the insurance companies couldn't cut you off because you cost too much money. It enacted a ban on insurance companies dropping people just because they're sick. The most controversial part, which was later overturned, was the individual mandate, which basically tried to keep costs down for everyone by mandating that everybody has to chip in if they're able to pay for healthcare insurance costs, either by having insurance or paying a tax. It introduced healthcare exchanges, which would be exchanges in each state that would allow people to get insurance and save money as a group buying insurance together. It included subsidies for poor people so that poor people could afford to get insurance even though they may be living below or very close to the poverty line. It even had risk management for insurers. The insurance weren't just screwed over in this. The ACA had parts of it that basically tried to mitigate any risks that the changes of the ACA could cause them. It raised the age at which you could keep your children as dependents on your own insurance to 26, which meant that kids or teenagers or young adults wouldn't have to worry about getting cut off and struggling to find insurance before they had a job. And it had the employer mandate for 50 plus employees. If you employed more than 50 employees, you either had to provide an insurance plan or be taxed. Massive misinformation made the bill somewhat unpopular at first, and there were lies about things like death panels that fueled the backlash to it. There were a lot of people on the extreme left that also hated it because they felt that it didn't do enough, even though it was the only compromise that apparently could be made. Personally, I don't hate Obamacare, though I do want to see something stronger come in its place and more unified, i.e. socialism! But in spite of any gripes, turns out that Obamacare was, in the words of a future president, a big effing deal. According to most analyses, Obamacare reduced the number of uninsured people by somewhere between 22 and 26 million people by 2016. Of course, the GOP couldn't let something that good for the public stand, so they made numerous efforts to repeal, partially or fully, Obamacare. And it is really astounding that they tried no fewer than 70 attempts to overturn the law.
My first day in office, I'm going to ask Congress to put a bill on my desk getting rid of this disastrous law and replacing it with reforms that expand choice, freedom, affordability. You're going to have such great health care at a tiny fraction of the cost, and it's going to be so easy.
Trump ended up making this kind of the major part of his presidency, or the major goal of his presidency. In his February 28th, 2017 First State of the Union, he said the following.
Tonight I am also calling on this Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare.
You'll notice that it was basically only the GOP applauding and the Democrats not applauding, because repealing Obamacare was not a Democratic thing. This was a highly partisan act that Donald Trump was planning. Under normal circumstances, the GOP wouldn't even be able to do it because of the filibuster, which requires a 60-vote threshold to repeal an act like that, which they did not have. But they already on January 12th had taken the first step to getting rid of Obamacare, which is they changed the rules. They changed the rules so that they could eliminate Obamacare with a simple majority instead of a supermajority, as most cases like this would have required. Also on that same day, Trump argued that he would be unveiling his new plan to replace Obamacare very, very soon, in a move that would eventually become extremely comical, as I'm sure you all know. On March 6th, the GOP finally introduced the Affordable Health Care Act in the House to replace Obamacare. The irony is, even many Republicans were opposed. Only weeks after it was introduced, the American Health Care Act was withdrawn on March 24th because they just could not get it passed. But finally, on May 4th, the House managed to pass a bill and sent it along to the Senate. The Senate passed their version, the Better Care Reconciliation Act, or at least proceeded to debate on July 25th. And this was where the Senate would finally vote, and this would decide whether or not these plans to chop down the Affordable Care Act would work. They still had trouble, but they opted for a plan called the skinny repeal, which would be sort of a starting point to kill the whole act. It would just kill the employer mandate with that first bill, and then with the votes between the House and the Senate, they could tack on amendments to try and gut even more. Next came a pivotal moment in history and in the lives of many Americans. John McCain, who had just been diagnosed with cancer, returned to the Senate on July 27th to vote on this final passage.
Mr. Peters.
Because of John McCain, that vote failed, and I'm not a fan of John McCain, but he secured his legacy in that moment. The effect of those bills, by the way, would have cut coverage for many, many Americans. So if they had passed, the ACA would have been effectively dead, and many Americans would have lost coverage. Trump wasn't done, though. On October 12th of that same year, he released Executive Order 13813, which involved basically by executive order rolling back parts of Obamacare, which also raised insurance premiums for people. A separate related order basically would add to the deficit and add to the cost. At that point, Trump told everybody Obamacare is finished, it's dead, it's gone. It wasn't, though he heard it. On June 26th of 2020, he tried to send the Supreme Court to kill Obamacare, which failed. Days before the election of 2020, he took one final stab at weakening Obamacare. The catch is the law has become even more popular as time has gone on, which has made them lie about their role in trying to destroy it. At the VP debate, Vance tried to say that Trump saved the act. Remember from the beginning, Trump said he had a plan to replace the ACA and it was going to be so much better. Then, at the presidential debate in 2024, we all saw how absurd that was.
So, just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan.
Trump spent his entire presidency trying to strip health care away from Americans just because he hated Barack Obama.